We would like to welcome you to the ADEA pre-recorded webinar called We Want Your Proposal. Time to submit a program or poster for the ADEA annual session and exhibition. We want to thank you for joining us and being motivated to find out how best to prepare your next ADEA conference proposal. In the next 30 minutes, we hope you will gain important information to assist you. Today's speakers include myself, Dieter Schönwetter from Winnipeg, Manitoba, up in Canada, up in Northern Point. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Dr. Robert Spears from Houston, Texas, far away south from me. The disclosure slide here talks about the fact that we have no relationships or commercial entitlements to this presentation. Our learning objectives are fourfold. We want to hope you to identify the various types of program submissions, which will be very important as you look to provide a proposal. We want to make sure you identify the different timelines and are aware of the key steps of the ADEA program submission and review process. And we also want to make sure that you're aware of the different conference themes each year and how to use these as you plan your proposal. And then above all, we want to make sure that we provide you with the criteria of a successful program submission. So as we go to the next slide, we'll look at the different types of ADEA sessions. There are three that are very important to you. These are the new idea session, the educational session, and poster session. Each of these three are reviewed by external reviewers, and this is where we're going to be focusing most of our time on. The Techexpo, the Corporate Council, and the other sessions are for other people who are applying for these. So let's start off with the first one, the new idea session. For this one here, you can see that the learning experience is going to be very important in the sense of you want to invite the participants through somehow providing a unique or unusual or innovative idea. And then the scope for this would involve providing new types of ideas to help either work with the audience or you provide something new and they can provide information about it. And the selection committee here seeks the ideas and concepts that sort of elicit a wow factor from the audience. So if you have something very innovative or something new, this is exactly where you want to put your proposal toward the new idea session. And because it's being done in the exhibit hall, we want to make sure that the session is quite entertaining and does provide that wow factor because many people will be coming by and taking a look. And if your session is stimulating, they will attend and participate in it. Let's move on to the next slide, the educational session, the 60-minute workshop. Here again, the learning experience is supposed to be experiential, interactive. What we mean by experiential, that the people who are in your audience have an opportunity to experience something, and that includes being interactive. So the presentation needs to involve the audience, not just as passive listeners, but we as audience members want to participate. And you can see the scope here. We want to, as audience members, solve problems or share ideas, maybe role play or generate answers to how-to questions. And as a result of this, you as a speaker are expected to launch activities with very little talking or lecturing, and not to just provide 10 minutes of question and answer at the end, but involve us throughout the whole sessions of the 60 minutes. It is involved in identifying what the issues are at our institutions, and how your theme works with our issues at our institutions and how we can solve it together. That'll be a very good approach to go with. Let's move on to the next session, the next slide, which is the educational session, which is a 90-minute workshop. These sessions are more challenging to have your abstract accepted because 90-minute sessions, there are fewer of these. And these are often given to the proposals that have some type of stellar or very inspiring type of concept. So they have to be highly engaging and highly collaborative. So these are more hands-on workshops where the audience has almost full-time opportunities to do something, to create something, to develop something further. And here again, the scope, the speakers are asked to provide some type of provocative questions, maybe present examples that are current in their institutions, or provide case studies that will help us as participants through the process of considering new ideas, perspectives, and techniques. And this way, all the ideas, not just from the presenter, but also from the audience are included. And then we as participants walk away enriched by the guidance of the person who's presented, as well as the input by the audience members. And as you can see here, the audience interaction needs to be robust discussion which means lots of discussion. You need to involve us as participants, and there needs to be a lot of question and answering throughout the entire workshop. And let's move on to the next slide, which is the educational session, the small group discussion. This is much more or less structured and yet informative. And what you want to do here is you may want to focus on some specific area. And ideally, the theme of the conference often helps you to identify current issues that you may want to look at. So take a close look at last year's proposals to see what the current issues were. You may want to follow the current news events of oral health education and what the current issues are, and then develop a proposal out of that to help with this small group discussion. So the sessions focus on a single specific and timely topic, often a question or an issue facing dental education today. And the more current or contemporary, the more attractive the proposal will be. And as you can see, you're looking at small group discussions, which usually 10 to 15 people. And this is different than the traditional educational setting, allows people to talk, share ideas, often in a round table format, so that the presenter is much more of a guide, and you're getting information from the people around you. Moving on to the next slide, which is very similar. In this case, it's a longer session. It's a 60-minute educational seminar. And here, the learning experience, we were looking at addressing one critical issue, technique, or model in a clear and concise manner. And here, for the audience, we need to understand what it is that you're talking about. So when you write your proposal, make sure it's very clearly articulated as to what the specific theme or idea is, or model. Expand it and help us as a proposal reviewers to understand exactly what it is that you want to talk about. You can talk or use a seminar to present the topic in more broad overview or focus and more detail, and then try to, again, limit it down to 3 main points about the topic and no more. You don't want to make this a comprehensive session, rather make it very specific to 2 or 3 major points. And throughout the process, again, make sure you involve us as the audience members to provide at least 15 minutes of interspersed during the program, some format of interaction where we can either do pair sharing, audience polling through some type of online devices, polling device, as well as question and answer. Then let's move on to the next slide, which is the educational session 90-minute seminar. Here you have an opportunity, because of more time, to move into a topic in a more deep manner. Because of 90 minutes, you should be able to cover the issue at a deeper level, or you may just choose to have a topic area and invite other people to share with you about the same topic area and see how different schools or different programs are doing or relating to that topic area. And it should be of immediate relevance as well as importance to dental education. We want to look at contemporary issues again, so we can deal with them, take them back home to our institutions, and be able to then solve and apply these ideas back in our home areas. The details of one or more solutions, techniques, and models are highly encouraged, and they need to be innovative and as well based on current best practices. Ideally, if you have any type of empirical background or what we call evidence-based practice, where research guides the process, this is ideal. But not necessary. And here again, at least 15 minutes, we want you to focus on time with us as the audience members, have us participate in providing feedback through think, pair, share, audience polling, and question answers as well. Then we move on to the educational session, the short talks, which is the next slide. Here, the scope is to provide a format for sharing ideas in 5-minute segments during a session centered on a particular educational theme. These short talks have been quite popular. We've had one in the area of scholarship of teaching and learning, as well as another one in the area of emerging technologies. And these are often done and proposed by other people. Now, if you have a new idea where you'd like to include people and invite leaders to provide 5-minute sessions in one area, we strongly encourage you to submit this educational short talk. And once it's accepted, then you can go out and invite those people from the different areas who can then present in this session. Notice that the short talk session can be either a 60 or 90-minute seminar. So it allows for many presenters. So if we have 5 presenters, or 5-minute presenters, you can look at in a 60-minute, usually about 10 people present. You would then provide the introduction and at the end, bring it all back together again. Same thing for the 90-minute session. You have 5 minutes of the session where you sort of plan on providing the overview, and then at the end, sort of wrapping it all together. These are highly attended sessions, and so we're looking for ideal and exceptional proposals for these short talks. Moving on to session number 13. These are the poster sessions. This is an excellent entry into the ADEA presentation arena. What we would recommend is that you try for any of the others, more prestigious sessions that we've just listed ahead of time, and like the 60 or 90-minute session, with the understanding that maybe your first time through, you may not have your presentation accepted. And when you get the feedback from the reviewers, take those comments and rewrite the presentation to fit the poster session. Because our poster reviews are due usually 3 to 4 months later, our abstracts for the bigger sessions are due in the beginning of June, whereas the poster sessions are often due in the first week of September. So keep that in mind. And the poster session here is quite open. You can address any problem or issue in dental or allied dental education. These include any topics such as admissions, alumni student demographics, clinical research, and you can see the entire list there. You can also come up with some innovative or new ideas that are sort of in the news right now in this area. So bring in current ideas, that's something definitely worth bringing forward. Then moving to the Techexpo sessions. These are very interactive. The scope here is focusing on tabletop demonstrations and presentations. These are often done by people who have innovations in the area of software or hardware, and are often people who are also sponsors or in the exhibit hall. However, you may have some new ideas that you want to present as well. These type of proposals are not necessarily go through the same type of step as the other ones to do that we've talked about before, such as the new ideas, the educational poster sessions. All right, I turn it over to the next slide to my colleague Robert, and he'll take you through the submission and review timelines.
So thanks, Dieter. That was a great review of the different types of presentations that are possible for our abstract submitters. So I'm going to spend just a little bit of time, and I'm going to take you through the submission and review process. We'll talk about some important topics or things that you need to know relative to this and how things work at that level. So first, you'll see up on the screen, submission review timelines. It's always important to be aware of what your deadlines are. You'll see that basically at the end of the meeting at ADEA, from then until June 1st is when the application deadline goes open for our educational abstracts. And for our posters, Techexpo's corporate submission, it goes until September 1. So always be sure that you're aware of what the deadlines are. Get your abstracts submitted on a timely manner, because late is not acceptable. Then you'll see the deadlines for when it goes under review, how you'll find out about if it was accepted or not, and be quite aware of the process. So on the next slide, what we'll go through is talk about the themes. So this is an important topic where sometimes people get a little bit too focused on what the theme of the conference is. It's always important to know what the theme is and be aware of kind of what the overall aspect of the meeting is. But oftentimes people think that if they put the name of the meeting, so you'll see that like for next year, discover your pathway. You do not have to say on your abstract that, you know, my project is all about discovering your pathway. Sometimes people think by including that in, it gets them guaranteed acceptance, and that's just not the case. So be aware of what the conference theme is, see if you can weave it into what your proposal is all about, but it doesn't have to include that specific phrase within it. Next slide. So further, this goes along with finding the right match for you. As Dieter mentioned a minute ago, trying to submit for one of the educational presentations is a great way to go, and then hopefully you can, if you have to, fall back upon the poster. But oftentimes your topic may not be appropriate for an educational session. It may be that poster is the best match. So what you're going to see is we're going to go through, we're going to talk about each of the different formats and why one might be more appropriate for you than another. Oftentimes, if you don't have current data, you're in the process of completing your study, it's not going to get accepted at the educational level, and a poster might be a better format for you. So we'll talk a little bit about more about that as well. As you see on this, knowing what the hot topics are, what are the current trends out there, what's innovative. If you're presenting something that's been presented at the meeting for the last 5 years and maybe it's gotten a little bit old and stale, that might not be what the committee is looking for. Instead, what are you doing that's innovative, that people want to hear about, they're going to want to show up for your presentation? That's really important. So you can talk to different people. If you're part of a SIG or a section, you might know from discussion you've had in there what topics are particularly of interest to the attendees, but try and find a topic that is really something that people are going to want to hear. On the next slide, what you're going to start getting yourself familiar with are rubrics. Now, what you'll see depending upon the type of presentation you're going to submit for, there are different rubrics that apply, whether it be an educational session, a poster, 60-minute, 90-minute, or whatever. So you'll see, even on this slide, it talks about seminar versus workshop format. There are different rubrics that are going to apply, and it's incredibly important for you to understand what these rubrics mean. You see how they show excellent to 1, so 4 through 1 scale, and then content, clarity, format, writing, and contribution. Each one of these aspects is important. One is no more important than the other, but it's important for you to understand what makes something an excellent proposal versus something that needs extensive improvement. So when you write for a specific abstract and presentation, be sure that you're familiar with the rubric. Next slide. So after you submit, what happens? So if you're submitting for the educational programming, deadline in early June versus the poster, other formats in September, what you'll see is it goes through this review process. So level 1, there are 3 blinded peer reviewers who will score your program according to the rubric. So if you've written your abstract submission relative to the rubric, you have a better chance of being successful. It doesn't guarantee success, but you're giving yourself the best chance you have possible. And then after those peer reviewers have scored it, a member of the ASPC, the Annual Session Programming Committee, will then go through and eliminate out the abstracts that were not going to be accepted and push forward ones that will be accepted. ASPC committee will meet in late July to make the decisions, at least on the educational programming, and then later for the posters and other formats. So it goes through a multi-process review. It's not determined by one person. Multiple people have input onto your abstract and trying to give you the best chance possible to have it accepted. Next slide. So this gives you a brief feel for what happens in this process. So from last year, you can see that for educational programs, about 250 were submitted and about half of them were accepted. There's only so much room at the convention that we can have the educational sessions, or else we would accept more. But you think of the small rooms that have to be used for it, we just can't accept more than the number that's present there. I don't want that number to discourage you from presenting or trying to submit an abstract for an educational session, because if you've got a great idea, if you've got something that you think that people want to hear about, this is a great way to go. Posters, there's more room for posters, and so you can see how the submission's a little bit higher on that, and the acceptance rate obviously is much higher because there's just more room for a poster format over the multiple days within the session versus what there are for the programming. But find the best fit for you, whichever that may be. The other thing I want to emphasize at this point is also that we really try and help our student presenters and try and factor that into the process as well, particularly on the posters. We know so many of you have to, if you're not presenting, you're not able to go to the meeting. So please understand that this is a process taken very seriously, and people really look, as closely as possible at all the different abstracts. Next slide. So we're going to show you kind of an example of a good submission. This is a case of where you kind of go through this on your own pace, stop the presentation or whatever to kind of look through it. But what you'll see it starts right at the start with the title. So put a title in there that draws attention. If you have a title that someone can't tell what your presentation is going to be about, it almost sets off a negative tone right from the start. How do you intrigue people with that title? Important to have learning objectives where potential attendees can look at this and they can tell what they're going to get out of your program. If they go through your learning objectives and don't see anything of interest to them, or they don't see how it's going to benefit them to attend, even as reviewers, it just has a minimal chance of being accepted. And then on the next slide, what you see is an abstract that's typically for a good abstract. So I'm not going to go through this, but if you'll take your time and go through, you'll see there was a great, from the start, how it was set about, telling you what they were going to be doing, how they were going to be doing it, and then what the participants could get out of this process. So this is a great example of a really good abstract. Next slide. All right, so this is an example of a schedule that you would try and set up for, in this case, a 60-minute workshop. So you don't have to follow this exact format, but what it's doing is it's giving you a feel for how you can set up a program that's going to be effective, that's going to be interactive, and get the attendees what they need. You'll notice out of this how there's content, but also activity. People don't want to come to particularly a 90-minute workshop, and oftentimes even a 60-minute workshop, and not be engaged. No one wants to sit and listen to somebody talk for 90 minutes. And as reviewers, the reviewers are going to look to see what are you doing to engage your audience. So it's very important to have activities built into the process. Next slide. So on the posters can kind of be of multi-formats, either research, new program, works in progress, or as I mentioned, student posters. And each one of these has its own merit. So you saw, next slide is about research posters. And what this does is it goes through topics for that are of broad interest to the attendees. So you can see how it goes through, whether it be things for admissions, teaching methodologies, instructions, communication, quality assurance, all hosts of different things. Remember, it's a broad audience that attends the meeting. So you're trying to come up with something that is not so narrow that it only hits a couple people, but what can you present that will have wide-ranging applicability to a lot of the attendees at the meeting. Next slide. So this is the rubric for that. Again, I'm not going to go through individually on the rubrics. This is where you can stop and pause and spend time in going through the rubric. But again, content clarity, format, the different things, what are you doing to hit these different aspects of your submission? Excellent versus needs improvement. Make sure you're hitting that left-hand side for each of these. New program posters are a lot of the same sort of things. This is where you're really getting a chance to come in and do things that are innovative, that are on the cutting edge, that maybe a lot of people in the attending the meeting have not heard about, don't know anything about, and ways for all of us when we attend meetings, we'd like to hear about new ideas, different ways that other people are doing it. So this is one where you have a chance to really be innovative and tell people about some great ways that you're doing things. So you have to also see at the bottom here, if it's not going to have a complete data analysis part, you might think about submitting this as a works in progress, which we'll get to coming up. Next slide. Right, again, rubric for this, go through, whichever format you're going to do, go through the rubric. I can't stress that enough. Next slide. So then for the student posters, the student posters can be any one of the formats that you saw above, as far as could it be, a works in progress, innovative idea, whatever it might be, but you're submitting this under student guides. So the student is the primary author on this, and you notice that they must be a full-time, either pre-doc or allied dental program, must not hold a faculty position. This is a true student who this is being submitted under. Oftentimes people try and think they've got a better chance of getting this poster accepted if they do it as a student submission, and while there might be a little bit of truth to that, that doesn't get you automatic acceptance just because it's being submitted under as a student poster. Next slide. Okay, so this is a point where I can turn this back over to Dieter. He's going to wrap it up, and best of luck in your submission.
Thanks, Robert, for providing those key success strategies and gems of truth of getting your proposals accepted. And this is very important to remember, the rubrics. Always follow back on those things as you make the proposal. Over the number of years that the review committee has been evaluating proposals, we have noted 5 very common errors that lead to proposals not being accepted. And these include forcing the theme into an abstract. Every year there's a conference theme, and so if you force it into your session, abstract, it doesn't always work well. And then we as the reviewers can see that. And so then it doesn't help with it being accepted. Second of all, providing statements without evidence, or stating that you're doing some research, but there's no research evidence to support it, or the research evidence has not been collected yet. So that right away will then eliminate that proposal. The biggest one, of course, is not following the rubric. If you just do it your own way and think, I don't need any work with this. Now, unfortunately, because you are listening to this session, you very likely will be following this. It's usually the people who do not take the time to prepare themselves, such as you. So you have a good chance of being successful just by attending this session. And then failing to have the proposal proofread. How often we've read through proposals and we see different types of spelling mistakes, grammar errors, and so forth. And right away, it makes us assume, which is not always the best thing, but as humans, we tend to do that. If you're making errors in the proposal, then very likely the presentation will also have lots of errors. So try to be error-free if at all possible, get someone else to read it and proof it for you. And if you're presenting on a study, it has to have ethical approval. So you need to have IRB, and in the new formats now, you have to check off whether or not you have IRB approval, and even provide our IRB number as well. And then summary, we thank you for being part of this session. We definitely, Robert and I both are hopeful for more students to participate in this. This is a wonderful learning experience. We strongly encourage you, if you are a student, to find a mentor. If you're a new faculty member or a new person to ADEA, find a mentor who's been successful in the past to help you through this. And as you can see, we've helped you to identify key steps of the ADEA program submission process. We've also identified the various types of programs that you can submit to, and also the awareness of the importance of the theme, as well as the various key topic areas in ADEA. Keep current, listen to what the current needs are in your institution and what they are in your area. These are things that we will be looking for as well at these conferences. And above all, we try to explain the criteria of a successful program submission. We strongly encourage you to work with others. Find someone at your institution who's done it before and has done it successfully. Work with them, and together you can be successful in submitting your abstract. And we look forward to seeing your abstract, and we hope that you follow the guidelines, have something innovative, and who knows, maybe your abstract will be accepted this time around. Thank you for participating. For questions about your proposals, please feel free to contact any of the ADEA Annual Session Program Committee members. They will be listed on the website. And as I mentioned before, make sure you also consult with a peer from your school who has successfully had their proposal accepted in the past. Well, Robert and I wish you much success as you put together your proposal for this upcoming conference. Remember the June 1st deadline for most presentation proposals and September 1st deadline for the posters. We wish you much effort and success.
Best of luck.